So rather than start with Jesus being attempted to be cast off a hill, I'm going to go back to what Judy read just a minute ago with 1 Corinthians 13. Just because, one, is beautiful, but two, it helps me to kind of put this passage in perspective. So Paul writes, "If I speak in the tongues of angels and of mortals, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith so as to remove mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. And if I give away all my possessions and hand over my body so that I may boast but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things. It hopes all things. It believes all things. It endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I acted like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we shall see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know in full as I am fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. And the greatest of these is love. The greatest of these may indeed be love, but I also think that sometimes it's also the most dangerous. 1 Corinthians 13 is a beautiful passage. I think a lot of people have bits and pieces of it memorized. You hear it all the time at weddings. And yet, unless you've read 1 Corinthians from beginning to this point, you don't realize that Paul has just basically set the Corinthians up to realize, okay, here's everything you haven't done. Here's where you haven't been patient or kind. Here's where you've trusted in these lesser things like tongues or prophecies instead of love. Here's where you have, and 1 Corinthians is a book about that individual church in different ways, finding ways to exclude, either people who were having to work longer than everybody else, and so they would come up and all the food was already eaten. Or people who were claiming certain privileges for themselves at the exclusion of others. And yet we are called to be a people of love. And sometimes that's hard. It's sometimes hard to love. I think sometimes it's easier to hate at an abstract, but I think it's sometimes hard to love in particular. I think it's easy to hate a group of people. But I also think sometimes you can say, hey, I love this group of people except for this person. And, as I was thinking about how to approach this passage today with Jesus and this reading, kind of coming out of where everybody's speaking well of him and then it turns really quick, one of the things I realized was that, Jesus was challenging how they loved. Challenging and pushing them beyond the boundaries of where they were comfortable. I think we all have that, we know the two great commandments. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. But it's that question afterwards in the parable, of the Good Samaritan. But who is my neighbor? Where is the limits of that? Where are the limits I can set for who is in and who is out? Who do I have to care about and who do I not have to care about? When Jesus is there and he's read from the prophet Isaiah and he rolls up the scroll and he says, today in your presence, these words have been fulfilled. And everybody begins to speak well of them because he's talked about what they hear as, again, the oppressed being set free, the blind being made whole, the year of the Lord's favor being declared, and they say, okay, yes, this is good news, and it's good news for us. And it is. But it's not good news for just us. It was good news when Jesus came and was talking he was not only talking to the people in Nazareth, he was talking to the people who he would do ministry out throughout his career, through those who people like Paul and Peter and the other disciples would go to, going and being pushed by the Spirit further and further away from what they knew and from their home. And so we, again, see very early in Jesus, he's beginning to push against those boundaries of who is my neighbor. And so, he goes back to the story of Israel, and he says, in the time of Elijah, there were many widows that Elijah could have stayed with, but God sent Elijah to a widow who was not one of us. And there are many people who could have been healed. Again, this is a picture, and I have it up there kind of because the picture itself is called Naaman. And I think that Naaman, being the leper, although he was a powerful man, was a person who would have been looked on, certainly by the Jewish people, as being excluded, as a person who, not only are you a foreigner, but you're an untouchable. And, there were many people in Israel who were these untouchables. But Jesus says, Elisha didn't heal them, but when Naaman, the Syrian, came, who was not only a foreigner, but he was also the enemy. He was the commander of the armies that were threatening Israel. And he heals him. And again, this doesn't sit well with the crowd. And so, again, all of a sudden they've gone from, this is the best words ever, to how dare you say this? And, this is one of those passages that's always troubling for those who follow Jesus, because you never know when you're going to cross that boundary that somebody else is going to be irritated with you about. When somebody else is going to say, I love my neighbor, but not that neighbor. Love is hard, and love is hard whether, and if you've ever been a parent and you've seen, and I haven't had this experience yet, but you see a child fall in love with somebody who you know that is going to hurt them. And you can't make them not love that person. But you got to love them through it. And sometimes that person ends up being not what you think that it will be. And sometimes they are. I think there is something to love that is powerful, and it's something that we have that inherent want to be connected. We have that inherent want to be a part of something. The puppets were going back and forth bantering between sports teams, and that may sound like a trivial thing, but it's a powerful thing for a lot of people. So, not last Thanksgiving, the year before, those who have been around long enough know that I am a Chargers fan. So Carissa was gracious enough to put on the Chargers blue instead of her Colts blue for this game. But we went to the Chargers played last 2 Thanksgivings ago on Thanksgiving here in Dallas, and so we were at the game, and it was a fun experience. And yeah, people are absolutely passionate about whether it was their Cowboys or that handful of Chargers fans who were there. I had a great deal of fun interacting with them. It's kind of, here's my tribe, here's my people. It's that we share this one thing in common, and they are, and I didn't know any of them, but for that time we were a little bit of a family, especially since we were the definite minority that day. But there are times where, again, that can bleed over into things where people get angry and irritated, and there were certainly times where, as that game went on and the Cowboys did not play well that day, that there were fans that were getting very agitated at anybody who represented that which was not a Cowboys fan. Thankfully, there was nothing too horrible that happened that I saw that day, but it was one of these things where, okay, yeah, on the one hand, I see these other people, they're my tribe, they're my family, and yet I see all these other people who I'm definitely not their family today. Um, one of the things I've loved doing since probably I was about 16 years old is going to concerts. One of the great things about concerts is you get together a group of people who you don't see otherwise, and who you know don't necessarily look like me or act like me or even have the same values as I do. And I was thinking about some of the people who I encounter sometimes, at a rock concert or at a country concert who I've never seen in church. And doesn't mean that they're not valued, or and part of it is, am I willing to enter into that relationship? Am I willing to enter into that time, that space? We all want to feel connected. We all want to feel valued. We all want to feel that bond that we have with somebody else, no matter how minor that little trait may be. We all want a place where we can belong. And the good in that is that we do seek out those places where we can belong, where we can find love, where we can find acceptance, where we can be welcomed for who we are. The challenge of that is that natural thing is that when we as people create those boundaries, we always exclude somebody. We always say, here's who's on the outside. And at least my experience of Jesus is, continually pushed me every time I want to set one of those boundaries, one of those borders, to continue to push me and make me uncomfortable and say, well, but this person is a part of that family too. It's not just the Jews, it's the Jews and the Gentiles. It's not just, to use Paul's language in Galatians, it's not just the free, it's the slaves and the free. It's not just not just men, it's men and women. All are one in Christ. And I do think that there are those times, and I've certainly seen it in my time in being a pastor and being churched, where, okay, here's that uncomfortable boundary that Christ pushes us up against. I've seen, in 15 years of ministry, I've seen a church split. I've seen certainly conflict more times than I care to remember. I've seen relationships fray. And I've seen times where people say, well, love me and not them. And I have to love both. That call to love, faith, hope, and love, these three endure, and the greatest of these three is love. That call to love people, is perhaps one of the hardest things that we are called to do. Perhaps sometimes it's even harder than forgiveness. It means that sometimes we have to let go of those things that we would say, here are my people. And my people say, I'm not supposed to love this other person. As a soldier, it was always easier to look at the other person on the other side of whatever I was going to have to do as my enemy. And yet I follow a Christ who says, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Bless those who curse you. And really it goes back to that love which is patient and kind and not envious or boastful or resentful or rude. The greatest of all things. Greater than faith. Greater than hope. Greater than prophecies, or greater than knowledge, or greater than faith or power. It is the gift of God. It is grace itself. is that steadfast love which kept God's people enduring all throughout their journey. And is that love which continues to push us and reminds us, here's this person in your midst who I've called you to love, who I've called you to care for. As we go through the Gospel of Luke, notice how many times Jesus is told, don't love that person. Don't love that person, they're a sinner. Don't love that person, they're a tax collector. Don't love that person because of these things. Or don't love that person because they're a Pharisee. Don't love that person because they think differently than you. Even those who crucified Jesus, in Luke's Gospel, Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. And so these three remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. Thanks be to God. Amen.